Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In his treatise On Tranquility, Plutarch has some very interesting remarks about time and how we orient ourselves towards the past and the future and the little sliver of the present that we're existing in. And some ways can make us content, happy, tranquil. Others are going to produce the opposite. So he begins this discussion by saying that every single person has within themselves the storerooms for tranquility, that is euthumia, and discontent, dysthumia, its opposite, and that the jars containing good things and bad things are not stored on the threshold of Zeus, but they're in our soul. And he says you can tell this by the difference between people's passions, people's emotions, right? So why does that come up at this point? We're going to have certain emotional responses. You could call them value responses if you want, depending on how we look at things in the past, how we use our capacity for memory, and whether we treat our life as something that is an actual unity, or we just live it out as isolated moments. Because if we do the latter, we're not actually going to be happy for the reasons that we'll see in just a moment. So he says that foolish people or thoughtless people, anoetoi, people who don't give much thought to things, they overlook and they neglect good things. So parrosi and amelusin, these are two verbs that are being used there. They don't register the things that are good, even when they're present to them. Parontata cresta. Why? Because they're not focused on the present. They're focused instead in thinking about the future, ta melonta. And so let's pause on that for a moment. I think we could come up with a lot of examples for this, not only of what other people do that produces discontent for them, but what we ourselves have done. So think about when you're at a meal and you're eating something and you're not even really paying attention to what you're eating, because you're thinking about the next thing, the next course that's coming out, and how amazing it's going to be. So you're just munching away, and you're not appreciating the good thing that you have. For example, what do we get early on in courses? Appetizers, soup, things like that. That soup might be the best thing in the meal. The main dish that you're being served might not actually be any good. Or maybe, the kitchen closes. Maybe that's all you're going to get is that soup. You should appreciate what's right there in the present. People do this with their relationships as well a lot, right? Or with their job. They get promoted and they're like, oh man, this is cool, but it's going to be so much cooler when I get the next promotion, right? Or you get into a relationship and you're like, oh, this person is so amazing. I can't wait till we get married. Well, you might have to wait a long time. Why not appreciate what you have right in front of yourself? Another great example, you go to a concert and there's a great opening band, right? But you're there to see this band, and you're like, get off the stage, right? You don't appreciate what they're doing. It might be that the main band is going to suck. So not focusing on the future at the expense of what's actually in front of us is going to help us to be more happy. And then we can also move back into the past. Now, you could say, well, the past is gone. You can't do anything about that. Is that true? Ancient philosophers really stress the importance of memory. There's a lot of verbs for it. And then there's mnemone, which is the act of actually remembering. So wise people, the phronimos, people who are prudent, through using their memory, they take things that are no longer present, things that are absent, that were good, and they make them, and I love this phrase here, they make things that are no longer at hand to be vividly, and argos is the Greek for that, to like right in front of our eyes. They make them existent for themselves, right? So we can think about all the great things that we've enjoyed. This is one way to deal with the fact that friends are no longer here. Lovers are no longer around. Does that mean we can't remember them? We can have the memory of a wonderful concert that we went to, or an amazing meal, or whatever it is. Provided you've cultivated your faculty of memory, that is something that you can do. And Plutarch isn't the only person to talk about this. This is very common in ancient philosophy. It was actually a set of practices that the Epicureans used themselves, but also the Stoics and Platonists like Plutarch. So we can make the past that no longer exists present in a certain way for ourselves by using our faculty of recalling or remembering. And fools don't do that. So they cut themselves off in two ways. They lose the present. They also don't use the past. So he says, the present good allows us to touch it, but for the briefest moment of time, and it eludes our perception. It seems to fools to have no further reference to us or not to belong to us at all. Is the present actually present, we could say? This is a good question for us. For fools, the answer is no. Even though they're there in the present, it's just a bunch of moments, all not even strung together, just happening over and over again. And so he talks about forgetfulness, lethe, a lack of remembering. Now, it's not just that you can, recall things into your mind. It's also that memory ties things together for us. And he has this great metaphor of a man twisting rope down in hell who allows a donkey that is grazing nearby to eat it up as he is twisting the rope. So insensible and thankless forgetfulness, right? On aisthetos, not perceiving, and acharistos, not being grateful, not being, mindful, we could say. Forgetfulness eats up the things that, we had. It steals upon these, takes possessions of them, consumes our actions, the things that we do, consumes our companionship, the people that we've been with, and our memories of those, consumes our enjoyment. And here's where it gets really interesting. Here's where we can talk about this in terms of metaphysics. So Plutarch says that an attitude like this, that just treats every moment as if it's its own thing and doesn't connect them together. By the way, we should think about people who are like, just live in the moment, man. Fools, according to Plutarch. So, right? It keeps a life from being unified, from being one life. So he says, when past is interwoven, and he's using this term asumplekomenon. So it is literally like braiding together. When past is interwoven with the present and, going on into as the future becomes present and the present becomes past. Separating yesterday as though it were different. This is what the fool does from today and tomorrow as if it were not the same as today. Forgetfulness makes every event to have never happened because it's never recalled. So it erases what's going on. And, think about it. You have maybe 80 years to live. Do you want to just forget about all of those things? You want to live in the moment at each point in time and, move to the next moment and leave the other moment behind and not connect them together in some sort of unified life, some sort of capacity for memory? Again, for Plutarch, that's foolish. That makes us unhappy. So a lack of unity in events. And then he says we can even talk about this as like a lack of unity in the person. He says those in the schools who do away with growth and increase on the ground that being is in continual flux, in theory make each of us a series of persons different from oneself. Those who do not preserve or recall by memory former events but allow them to flow away actually make themselves deficient and empty every day and dependent on the morrow, dependent on the future. So again, they can't see the good of the present precisely because they're not holding on to it, as though what had happened last year and yesterday and the day before had no relation to them, nor had happened to them at all, because they're not even the same person, right? So this is kind of an extreme position here, but think about our own lives. How much of your life, how much of the good things that you've experienced that are now gone, how many of them can you actually remember? How many triumphs, successes, how many adversities, how many relationships, how many jokes, how many, we could go on and on and on, do you actually preserve within your memory? Lacking memory is a big, big problem. If you cannot remember, if you don't start building that capacity to connect past and present and future together, you're actually making a worse life for yourself. That's not even a unified life. So that's one big problem, right? Or set of problems. Then he shifts to another issue. You might say, okay, well, I'll just remember stuff then. Well, what kind of stuff are you going to remember? So he's got this very funny metaphor. He says that another problem arises when, like flies which slip off the smooth surfaces of mirrors but stick to places which are rough or scratched, men drift away from good things and they become entangled. And again, he uses this word symplokein, right? They are actually emplokotai. So again, woven into, entangled in remembering. So now they are remembering. What are they remembering though? Unpleasant things. So they're not recalling previous good things to mind. They're thinking of things that are, in this case, literally shameful or embarrassing or upsetting or stuff like that. And he talks about them. Again, we have another sort of bug metaphor. He talks about this place where beetles fall in. It's called death to beetles because they're unable to get out and they turn and circle around until they die in that place. We have traps like that we use for wasps and beetles and cockroaches and all sorts of other bugs, right? Maybe also for rodents, things like that. So some people treat their memories like that. They're stuck within a labyrinth, perhaps we could say, of bad memories. And he talks about them as brooding on bad things, brooding on evils, quite literally, kaka, right? Bad things. And what are they doing? They only think about that. And he says that they do that so much that they actually don't wish, they don't choose, ukthale, to recover, to stand up is the word, to be resurrected is another way of translating it, or to arise, to revive from that state, right? So what we should be doing is actually thinking about good things, happy things. That's what these people don't do. They drift away from it's translated here as joyous and agreeable, the things that we actually enjoy, the things that make us happy, and they focus on the bad stuff. So it's not just that you have to cultivate your memory, that, wise people have good memory, keep things connected together. Foolish people don't think about the past or even adequately the present that they're experiencing. It's also what you're focusing on. If you've got the option to remember good things or to remember bad things, why in the hell wouldn't you want to remember good things rather than dwelling on a bunch of bad things? I mean, there could be some usefulness if it's going to help you deal with similar situations in the future and not do the same mistakes, right? There's some usefulness to that. But if we're just talking about enjoyment, why not cultivate memories so you can have past goods ready at hand that you can recall and meditate upon? Why not unify your life so past and present and future are connected together, are interwoven with each other, with the person that you are? Why not be the person who you were 30 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 minutes ago, provided that gives you happiness? If you do this, if you live that kind of life and accumulate those sort of memories, that conduces considerably, as Plutarch is going to tell us, to feeling tranquility. If you do the opposite, or you don't remember things, you're probably going to be discontent.